All right, hi guys, welcome back. So where we left off at the last video, I was left you guys to finish working this first section. Now I have knit until I've used about 50 grams. I've used almost exactly 50 grams of the yarn I had in this cake. So that's about a quarter of my main yarn overall. It's a little bit less than a quarter, but around that. And I have a multiple of 10 stitches between my first and second stitch marker and my third and fourth stitch marker. Okay, so I have actually got 60 stitches on between these sections. So overall my stitch count is 127. So I've been keeping track on my stitch count tracker. Like I said, the format of this is not right and my printer's not working, so I can't reprint it right now. But yeah, I'll just go through, and every time I've done a garter repeat, I'll tick it off, or I can check, once I've done a few repeats, then I'll double check my stitch count and then mark off where I am. I always make sure to finish marking off where I am in the stitch count repeat pattern. That way I know where I'm at when I come back to picking up my project. Okay, so now that we're at the point where we have done section 1 and we're ready to move on to section 2. So section 2 is going to be our first transition section. What we're going to do here is we're going to leave our main colour attached to our project. We're not going to cut this off or anything. We're just going to let it hang out there. And then we're going to start knitting with our new colour. Now the instructions are again written with both increase methods included, so it's up to you which one you want to continue with. Like I said before, I recommend you just stick with what you've been doing so far to keep it simple for yourself. What we're going to do now, like I said, we're going to leave your main colour attached and we're going to knit. We're going to be alternating colours every 2 rows. So we're going to do one 2 rows with your contrast colour, then 2 rows with the main colour, 2 rows with the contrast colour. So what we're actually doing, we're knitting this section here. Let me show you on the finished shawl so you can get an idea. We're going to be doing this section with these colour blips in between. So essentially what you end up going to be doing, you're going to be doing a normal garter repeat in your new colour, your contrast colour first, and then in your main colour you're going to be doing this row where you have some knits and some slips, and that's basically what the pattern is. So you're going to be doing that for a few times before we then cut our main yarn and we carry on knitting with the contrast colour for the following section. So section 2 is our transition, then section 3 will be this next solid section of knitting. So apologies for the poor lighting and the shadows and stuff, it's just really grey today. There we go, that might be better. So we're just going to leave this grey yarn, or our main colour yarn, to hang out at the edge there, and we're just going to pick up and start knitting with our next colour. And remember to leave a tail just a few inches to weave in later. So you just pick up, and the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to work 1 repeat, so 2 rows of the garter pattern. And so this is going to be just increasing 4 stitches, basically exactly what you've been doing before, just with a different colour now. Okay, so the first 2 rows of the transition section have been knit out of the contrast colour. Then next we're going to switch back to our main colour yarn. And so again, we're not going to cut the contrast colour, you're just going to leave it to hang there, and you're just going to pick up the main colour yarn. And following the instructions, we're going to knit up to the first marker, slip the marker, do your increase however you do. I do a yarn over. And then it's going to be, then you knit 1 and then you follow the repeat. So SL2B is slip 2 back. So slip 2 with your yarn in back. So leaving your yarn in the back of the work on the side. In front would mean bringing the yarn round to the front. Okay, so in back we'll leave it there on the back side of the needle. And you're just going to slip 2 stitches purlwise. Okay, so you just slip them as if you're going to purl the stitches. You don't slip them knitwise like this, because that will twist the stitch. So you're going to slip 2 stitches purlwise, followed by a knit 3, and you're just going to repeat that until the pattern tells you, in this case it's going to be until 1 stitch before the marker. Okay, so we're just going to do that. Okay, so I've got 1 stitch before my marker. You just follow what the pattern says. In this case it's just knit 1, yarn over, and then you do your slip marker, knit 1, slip marker, yarn over. Reverse yarn over for me. And then it's a knit 1, then you go into the repeat. This time the repeat is reverse. It's a knit 3, then slip 2, yarn back. So you just start with your knit 3, and then slip 2, yarn in back, and continue. And because you're slipping stitches, you want to make sure that your float behind those slip stitches isn't going to be too tight, which is why I periodically will stop and stretch out the stitches along the needle just to make sure there's enough of a float going behind them so it doesn't end up puckering the fabric. So you just repeat this until you get to until when? Until 1 stitch before the marker again. Okay, got my last stitch before the marker, knit 1, do your increase, and then knit to the end of the row. Okay, and then for the wrong side row, it's mostly going to be knitting, so you're just going to do your knit 3. If you did the yarn over method, finish that yarn over, and then so then the repeat is knit 1 in this case, and then slip 2, front knit 3. So now we need the yarn in front for when we're going to be slipping our stitches, because now we're on the wrong side of the work. If we slip the stitches with the yarn in the back, we're going to have our floats on the right side of the work, which we don't want that. We want the floats to stay on the wrong side. So we're going to bring that yarn back round to the front of what we're knitting now before we slip our 2 stitches. Then we put the yarn back on the back side of the needle to then knit the next 3 stitches. Okay, so that's the repeat. We bring the yarn to the front, slip the next 2 stitches purlwise, put the yarn in the back again, and then knit 3. Okay, so you're going to do that until 2 stitches before the marker. Okay, I've got 2 stitches before the marker, just going to knit 1, and then because I did a yarn over, I'm just going to knit that as well to close it. Slip the marker, knit your center stitch, and then finish off that yarn over increase and knit 1 more. So if you did a make 1 or make 1 increase instead of the yarn over one, you would just be knitting 2 stitches here instead. Again, the pattern has it all written out. And this time again, the repeat's going to be reversed. So we're going to start with a knit 3. Then we bring our yarn to the front, slip the next 2 stitches, put the yarn in the back again on this side, this half of the shawl. And so you're just going to repeat that again, following the pattern until 2 stitches before the marker. And there we go. Okay, so the last 2 stitches, because I did the yarn over increase, it's just going to be a knit 1 and then closing that yarn over, and then finish off that row. Okay, so that is now what your work looks like. So you've got those slip stitches and then the garter little blips of knitting in between. Okay, so we're now at the point where we've done 2 garter repeats essentially. So we've done one just plain garter repeat and one in this transition pattern. We're going to continue to follow the instructions for completing the first transition section. So for me it's all of this stuff. It's essentially the same as what we've done now, except on the actual transition pattern rows with where we're knitting with our main color yarn and slipping stitches. The instructions at the beginning and end of each of these sections around the markers will be ever so slightly different, so you're just going to have to check the pattern for that. Otherwise the repeat and the actual patterning is the same on all the rows. And yeah, we're just going to finish this transition section, and then I will catch up with you guys at the end of this section, where we will have added 28 stitches overall to our stitch count. And I will talk you through how we move on to doing section 3, and yeah, that'll be that for this video. Okay, so I am back now. I've finished the first transition section. You can see here we have 3 rows with the main color and the slip stitches, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows with just the contrast color doing the garter repeat. So there's 7 garter ridges, or 14 rows in total. And so keeping track on my stitch count, I'm actually now at 155 stitches total. So this section here was all transition 1, so you can kind of mark it out if you want to keep track of where you're at, where different things were, so you'll know, okay, so at the end of Here I was at 155 stitches, or wherever you're at, you might be at a different point depending on where you finished your first section. This is why I don't give specific stitch counts for each section, because it's adaptable based on your progress and your yarn amounts and stuff like that. Okay, so what we're going to do now that we've finished section 2, which is our first transition section, we're going to cut our main color yarn because we won't need it for the next little bit. So I don't have my scissors handy, so I'm just going to use my fingers. And yeah, just make sure you leave a tail for weaving in later. And now our section 3 is going to be another garter section. So it's going to be exactly the same as what we did in section 1 in our first section here, but we're just going to be knitting it with our contrast color. So we're essentially just going to keep repeating the garter pattern until we no longer have enough yarn to knit another repeat. Now the only thing you have to bear in mind, again, much like with section 1, you want to make sure that your stitch count between the first and second marker and then between the third and fourth marker is a multiple of 10. Okay, so you want to stop when your stitches between these markers are like, I don't know, 80, 90, 100, whatever, a multiple of 10. And it might be a case that you'll get to that point where you have, say, 90 stitches between your markers, but you still have a little bit of yarn left over, probably enough to do another repeat. So what you can do in that case, if you want to maximize your yarn usage and you don't want to have a whole lot of leftovers, in that instance what you can do is you can just knit one more repeat back and forth without adding any increases. So just basically knit 2 rows without any increasing, just to use up that little bit of extra yarn. Missing a set of increases on one repeat, one garter ridge repeat, isn't going to make a huge visual difference to your shawl, but it will allow you to use up the last little bit of your yarn. And the other option, the other situation that might happen, and this happened to me a couple of times with my first shawl sample, is you might get to a point where you only have enough yarn left for one repeat or one garter repeat left, but you might be, you might need a few extra stitches just to get to that multiple of 10 stitch count. So what you can do then is however many extra, say you need 4 extra stitches, you can divide that 4 extra stitches, 4 extra increases over the length of the shawl. So you'll have your normal increase points, but then say you need 4 more stitches to be increased to get to your multiple of 10. What you can do on that last repeat is evenly space out. So you'll do 2 extra on this side, 2 extra on this side, and just evenly space them out along the row, or at least a few stitches away from your existing increase points, so it sort of blends in a bit more seamlessly. And again, I definitely did that at least once on my original shawl. And yeah, so that's how we're going to progress from here. What I'll do is I will, from here on, because section 3 is just going to be our solid garter section, like I just said. Section 4, we're going to be moving into the transition section again, into the next color, and then section 5 will be another solid section. So we're going to be in a period of basically of repeating the same sort of instructions a few times. So this is where we're going to be doing this bit in section 3, this solid section. Then section 4 will be this section, section 5, section 6, and then section 7 is this last solid colored section, and then section 8 is going to be the end piece and the bind off. Okay, so for section 3 to 7 essentially, so from this solid section to the end of this solid section, I'm going to film that as a separate video, because there's not going to be much technique to go over. It's going to be more vlog style, where it's just me as I'm knitting along, and then if I come across something, or one of those examples like I mentioned about knitting a couple of extra rows or adding in a few extra increases, I will film that as well to show you how I handle it in like a real life situation when I actually get to that point in my knitting as well. Okay, so yeah, thank you for joining so far. I will see you again soon. Bye.